Warning. This episode will be going into scenes with some intense and grotesque imagery, including graphic torture. Listener discretion is advised.
Lore Together is proud to be part of the Boss Rush Games network. Feel free to find out more at bossrushgames.com/network. Hi, I'm Safi.
And I'm Mystic.
And this is Lore Together. This is the podcast where a husband and wife team go over all the story building characters and worlds of your favorite video games because it's what we like to do together. We lore together.
Yes. This is episode 37. Before we get into the episode, though, if you'd like to contact us, you can do that on Twitter at LoreTogether, on Instagram at LoreTogether, through email at LoreTogether@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by going to patreon.com/LoreTogether, where you can pay a per-episode pledge to get early access to episodes, mini-episodes, Q&As, and other things we may be doing in the future. So we are specifically going to be talking about the book Mass Effect Revelation, which is the prequel novel. Now, there is other prequel stuff that we could go into in another future episode. There's comic books.
Yes.
But this particular novel was kind of what got me through a whole year of work when I was working retail, because I would just listen to this audiobook.
Who voices the audiobook?
David Kalachi. And it's a pretty interesting listen. He does a really good job getting, the subtle emotion across without going too deep into acting.
Yeah, and it's not a recognizable name, so it's probably somebody who's just well known for narration.
Right. And we've covered a little bit about it already, because the story opens in 2157 with John Grisham on his way to Arcturus.
Grissom, the manliest man to ever man in humanity.
Aboard the SSV New Delhi, he's going to congratulate the Alliance's the new graduates of the Alliance's N7 training program. In the course of that, he meets with the topic of what we're going to talk about, David Edward Anderson, who is top of the list.
Yeah.
Partially because of his name, but literally Grissom says, based on his accolades and his marks and everything, he probably would have been at the top of the list if it wasn't alphabetical as well.
Oh, yeah. So his name's David Edward?
David Edward Anderson.
DEA? Is that intentional? Just had to say that out loud.
And this is where we find that the Turians, they don't know the Turians yet, but they know that an unknown alien force has attacked the Alliance post at Shang-Chi.
Okay.
And they kind of go back and forth. Grissom is interviewing him as a soldier, and Anderson is pretty much impressing him with how cool-headed he's being about it, despite this, giant bombshell he's dropped.
Right.
And the end of the discussion has him talking about whether to fight or surrender, as it's unknown how big this alien fleet could be. Mm-hmm. And Anderson says fight.
Right.
And Grissom wants to know why. And Anderson basically says the aliens will not sit idle in Shang-Chi now that they know about Earth, because we send a fleet to recapture.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you have no idea what the aliens' intentions are, you have to assume hostility, and they have to know that you are not from that planet. So
Right. And Grissom says you don't think surrender is an option, and Anderson's reply is that humanity wouldn't survive under alien rule.
That is probably fair.
And that freedom is worth fighting for. So Grissom keeps... I'm not going to do play-by-play for every single scene. We're going to brief stuff. But this is kind of an interesting scene because Grissom asks him that even if we lose, is Anderson willing to sacrifice his wife Cynthia for the sake of freedom? Anderson is married at this point.
Yeah.
And Anderson responds, I don't know, sir. Are you willing to condemn your daughter to the life of a slave?
All right.
And this kind of seals it for Grissom. He's like, if we have more people who think like you, we're ready for this.
Right. Because it's an interesting long-range thinking because, of course, there's a part of you that wants to think about that brokering peace would be an option, that you could do that. But I think it depends on how first contact would go. Right.
And this is why we see that it's important the Citadel Council steps in after a few months of this fighting. When both sides started gearing up for actual war, the Citadel Council came in and stepped in. Because the default mindset on both sides was that the other side is a problem. The Turians thought us a danger to the rest of the galaxy, and we thought them a bunch of potential slavers.
Right. And I think that's fair. I mean, nobody thought to sit down and talk to a Turian and figure out what their language was or anything.
Surprisingly, I have to look into it. A couple of the comics do deal with first contact, but I don't know how the language barrier was broken. You know?
Yeah, it's always interesting to see how science fiction tries to broach that subject.
So 8 years later, humanity is recognized by the Council and granted an embassy.
Yay!
So we're part of the Galactic Society now. And in
Yeah.
2165, now Lieutenant Anderson is under the command of Captain Belliard on the SSV Hastings.
Belliard feels like such an unfortunate name.
The ship answers an SOS while patrolling the Skyllian Verge, which is an isolated region in the farthest fringes of Alliance space. The SOS is originating from a science facility on Sidon. Inside the facility, Anderson and his team, minor characters, but I always find the names fun, Gunnery Chief Jill Da, Corporal Ahmed O'Reilly.
Okay. Oh, I love names like that.
Private First Class Dan Shea, and Private Second Class Indigo Lee. Like they're really leading into this is the future, and a lot of the barriers that we had in history have broken down.
I've done that with a lot of my sci-fi names, is that it's just different culture names mashed together in unexpected ways for at least the current generation of Americans. So
Right. They discover an elevator in the back of the base leading to an area underneath the main facility. And this is kind of not normal. They're kind of, what's going on here?
yeah.
And as they go down there, they're attacked by several mercenaries from the Blue Suns.
Uh-oh, yes. And the Blue Suns, I feel like, is something that if you played a multiplayer, you see them come up a lot.
They're in the multiplayer. They are also in... Blue Suns is the mercenary company that Zaid in Mass Effect 2 had founded and was part of.
Right, and then he was kicked out of, right? He had to get
I
revenge
think so, yeah.
on the co-founder.
It's been a while since I played Zaid's missions.
Oh, Zaid. I was rewatching one of the endings. It's like, oh, we'll be able to do what we want with the future for the extended endings. And there's a picture of like Zaid reclining on like a lawn chair on top of like a crate on this massive like terraformed planet or something. It was comical. I was like, seriously?
It's a great combat scene with Anderson basically moving his team up person by person to keep the mercs off balance. And they do this, the book does this very well, but we're not going to go play by play because we'll be here forever.
Yeah.
Jill Dodd does take a hit. She'll recover. It's in her leg.
Yikes.
They eventually win with one merc running off into the maze of tunnels that are underneath this facility. And Anderson kind of holds back, realizing if he goes in there, they have no idea what the layout is. They have no idea what traps there may be. So he's just like, we'll get to it later. Let's check this area first.
That's fair.
And eventually the team discovers the dead bodies of the scientists who were stationed at Sidon. The evidence suggests that they may have been betrayed by one of their own.
Oh.
However, the remaining mercenary manages to set off a bomb that destroys the entire lower level.
Oh,
Anderson and his crew barely escape with their lives.
So they never got a chance to check out what might be remaining in the rest of the base.
Right. It's kind of left, whatever.
But if they had gone deeper also, they could have died.
Right. Literally, if I remember the book correctly, it's been a while since I've listened to it, and I do have a paperback copy, as you know. If I remember correctly, they take out the merc, but then they see that the bomb is going off, and literally it's like split seconds, like, can the electronics expert do it? Will he understand it? Is it the timer accurate? All this stuff, and just run. Everyone run.
Right. It's like the simpler answer is the one that saves the most lives in this instance.
On the colony of Elysium, a scientist named Kali Sanders, recently stationed at Sidon, has gone AWOL with several classified files.
Now, the name Kali Sanders sounds familiar to me, even though I haven't read the books. Should it?
She does appear, if you take certain paths through Mass Effects 2 and 3, she does appear in the game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She has gone AWOL with several files, intending on reporting her superiors for conducting illegal research.
Uh-oh.
Hearing about the attack on the news while at a bar, she leaves to figure out her next move and is almost immediately arrested by an MP.
Oh, like she wasn't trying to be covert enough to...
She's trying to hide, but she's not a spy. She's a scientist.
Right.
Stunned that they've already found her, she submits. However, as she is being cuffed, she realizes that the pistol that the MP has is wrong. It is not standard issue for Alliance personnel.
Uh-oh.
So she kind of just leans forward a little bit and throws her head back and breaks his nose.
Nice.
She flees, but realizes her escape from Sidon has put her in danger. She runs to find help from the one person she told her mother she would never talk to again.
Dun dun dun.
Elsewhere, on a Batarian colony called Kamala, a rich Batarian named Edan Hada meets with the Blue Suns.
Batarian, we said.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. We're not used to thinking of them as rich.
They can get quite wealthy.
Yeah, but I'm just...
We usually see them as mercs, or we
Mercs.
see them as
They're usually
refugees. We don't
Yeah.
really see them within their colonies and stuff. And Kamala is a Batarian colony, so we don't really go into their area of space that much.
Not in the game. In the game, unfortunately, they're usually relegated to like slums.
Yeah.
If we're finding the place where they live, so this is intriguing to me.
He hired them to attack the human research facility of Sidon.
Oh well, I guess the audience has that solved pretty quickly.
Once he learns of Sanders leaving, he fears the information she had would point to his involvement in the attack and sends the mercs to deal with the loose end. However, he receives news of their failure, basically the guy that was found picking up his teeth,
Yeah.
and hires the Krogan bounty hunter Scar to assassinate her.
Krogan bounty hunter, dangerous stuff. Just kick him in the quads and hope it'll be fine.
Anderson arrives at the Citadel to meet with Ambassador Anita Goyle.
Ambassador Anita Goyle. So this is the ambassador that precedes Udina.
Yeah, I don't know if there's one between the two of them, but she is definitely his predecessor in a way.
Now, is the attitude similar, is the question.
She's a shrewd politician, but I think she's not as self-serving.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Ambassador Goyle informs Anderson that the Sidon facility was researching AI.
Ooh.
And it's kind of funny that they kind of have a back and forth, and she basically says, we need, like, he's like, that's illegal or whatever, and
Yeah.
she's like, we need to have an edge. This could be our edge.
Yeah.
You know?
But, like, at the same time, did you see what happened to the freaking...
Right.
To Quarians? Like, you can't look at the Quarian story and not think that that is essentially like, warning, you may not like what you birth when it comes to this new race of machines. It's just how it goes.
She sends Anderson to locate Kali Sanders, who may know who was behind the attack and the whereabouts of Dr. Shu Qian, the brilliant scientist in charge of the Sidon facility.
Oh, interesting. This reminds me a bit of the plot in the Star Trek series Picard now. Forbidden AI research, a brilliant scientist who's connected to it.
A little bit. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the Turian Spectre Saren Arterius has tracked an illegal weapons exchange to a warehouse in Jushi. Normally this would be something for the local authorities, but the sellers had Turians in their ranks, and the buyers, a gang called the Grim Skulls, had humans among their ranks.
With a name like the Grim Skulls, that is such a human idea.
Turians selling weapons to humans is something that Saren can't abide. Saren bears a grudge towards humanity after losing his brother in the First Contact War.
Grudge, grudge.
After wiping out most of both parties of mercs, fairly easily actually, pretty small-time gangs,
Oh, wow.
and literally he shoots both lookouts, and
Wow.
nobody ever checks on them, and he kind of makes note of, like, more experienced gangs would have had somebody checking on the lookouts every few minutes. Like,
Right. So he's like, I shouldn't be this lucky, but here I am.
Saren interrogates a survivor and then learns that the weapons were meant for the Blue Suns, who were planning a major operation but pulled out at the last minute to avoid Spectre attention. Then Saren kills him.
Thanks,
But
Saren.
obviously Saren's
Ugh.
interest is now piqued.
Yeah. So Saren has already essentially, I don't want to say dehumanized the humans because that's kind of the, but he's essentially diminutized humanity.
We're gonna get.
In his
I'm
head.
gonna get a little political here. Saren is a cop who is above the law. There is no one for him to answer to, at all, other than the
Yeah.
council.
That's not good. You never want. So, my opinion is if you're going to have a force of people that help rein in citizens for the law, they should be serving the citizens who are benefiting from the law. They shouldn't be serving just any sort of quote unquote higher power of any kind.
Right.
whether it's a council or any other position like that.
Peace at all costs usually has a heavy cost.
Yeah, it's kind of like when people say, "Oh yeah, I believe in utilitarianism when it comes to happiness," and it's like, but whose utilitarianism, whose happiness comes first? But we're totally gonna get into the weeds if we continue that path, and I'm sorry.
So, meanwhile, Anderson has just one lead to go on as he's been going through her files, and there's nothing. Like, there's nothing to indicate why she would be a traitor. She's pulling a top salary. There's nothing here. But there is one oddity in her file. Her father is labeled unknown, which is a near impossibility in the era of universal birth control and massive DNA records.
Massive DNA records, okay. Something that I don't feel comfortable with.
Well, I think what they mean by that part, there are some problematic stuff in this book, and we'll get to one of the things that some people have a problem with, at least based on when I was doing research. I saw some people had a problem with it. But massive DNA records, first off, they're both in the military. Second off, Kali is from one of the poorest areas of Earth, so her family is probably on some sort of assistance or welfare.
Okay.
And, there's obviously, at this point, we're in the future, so stuff like your genetics is probably logged just for disease or whatever. Much like when we had a kid, we sent blood samples for them to check for
certain genetic
markers.
Yeah, I don't mind that being on record. I just feel like if little buddy's DNA was on record for the government to look at whenever they needed it, I would not be comfortable with that, because there is a chance for malfeasance in the future. But again, now I'm going to derail again from you telling this background.
So, because this person is unknown, and this is weird, he has hired a information broker who turns out to be Salarian, and meets with her.
Oh my gosh, she's not busy back on the homeworld laying as many eggs as possible? This is a big deal for Solarians because they're a matriarchal society, because only 10% of all eggs are female?
But maybe she didn't want to do that.
What?
Maybe she didn't want to do that.
I mean, she has a right to choose. It's just that culturally, it's a big pressure for them to just breed, because there's not as many females.
Right.
It kind of gives them a lot of power back home, too.
Yeah. I'm amazed you remember that, because I didn't.
As a woman, that was kind of an interesting tidbit to me.
So she has found something interesting, and though it was scrubbed from the extranet, Solarians are adept at espionage, and have also dealt with the extranet for far longer than humanity has even been a spacefaring society.
Oh, that's true. They are some tough cloacas.
Kali's final grades from the academy were sent to an unnamed individual on Elysium. And it's kind of funny when you read this, actually, because he starts getting bothered because Solarians just talk in circles and they get distracted.
Solarians are the gnomes of the Mass Effect universe.
And he just eventually goes, "Just give me a name. I don't want to hear anything else, just a name." And she goes, "It's John Grissom."
Whoa! So that's probably who earlier on she was going to go find, but she wasn't going to talk to again?
But the thing is, it's weird that her grades were sent to him. And so the Solarian surmises he's likely her father.
Right. Yeah.
I did cut out a big chunk of his logic in getting to even that point. So read the book if you want it.
Again, we are not here to say don't experience the media that we talk about. We're here to say
we give you the broad strokes. You can relish in the details.
Yes, the media that we're talking about is probably worthy of your time, and the lore is part of the reason. Yeah.
We catch up with Saren as he tracks down a Blue Sun mercenary named Grotto Iba. Sorry, Iba. I don't know how to say this, actually. It's Grotto. I got that part.
Yeah.
Iba. IB-BA. Iba?
Iba. I don't know. I have no idea.
I'm going to call him Grotto.
Let's just call him Grotto.
A Batarian who has come into some money as the Blue Suns actually share all profits amongst the group.
Blue Suns are socialists.
It's weird. But yeah, so he goes to this high-end brothel called Sanctuary.
Wait, that just sounds like in Disco Elysium there's a phrase of like, all employees a member of the board. It just sounds like
he ends
that.
up picking a human girl.
Oh.
Deciding that he is going to hurt her.
No.
And take out his hatred of humans on her.
No.
But when he goes into the room and the door opens, it's Saren who is in the room.
Well, interesting switcheroo there.
This is the warning part of the episode, but I feel it's important to understand Saren's character to see how brutal he can be.
So, the writer is the author, I should say, who is...
Drew Karpyshyn.
Who has written for the series. He has set it up that we shouldn't feel sorry for this Batarian because he was going to inflict something on somebody else.
Yes.
But
let's...
This looks like there's a big old curvaceous butt happening right here.
Grotto is not a good person.
Right.
And was likely going to do horrific things to somebody.
Right.
That said, Grotto is not a Spectre. He is a merc.
And also...
He is not a law enforcement officer.
And also,
to use a term.
Between you and me, torture's never a good answer, period. So this is not... I don't like escalating violence, but I'm just thinking of it in terms of why you would set it up this way.
Saren explains that Sanctuary knew what he had in mind as soon as he picked a human consort. And basically coldly and slowly approaches Grotto, who's sitting there like waggling his fist and then just starts feeling foolish because the Spectre's just walking towards him slowly.
Yeah.
And then he kicks Grotto to the ground.
Okay.
Lifting him up by his lapel, basically, he uses his thumb to rupture one of Grotto's eyes.
Okay, that's just ouchies. No way. Oh gosh. Oh. Okay. All right.
And Grotto passes out.
Yeah, that's painful.
And then wakes up when Saren breaks his arm at the elbow.
What? Oh, that's awful.
And he proceeds to tell Grotto that he disgusts him, that he wanted to torture an innocent victim for his own pleasure. Then tells him torture is only useful when it has a purpose.
Oh, we've got so many problems left and right happening in this scene.
And Saren tortures Grotto for hours.
No, don't tell me anymore. It's that, oh my gosh. That's awful.
He breaks all his limbs
No.
and fingers. And like Grotto goes into shock and unconsciousness.
Right, of course
and
you would after all that.
Saren just sits there and waits because he literally goes, there's no point torturing an unconscious body.
So here's the thing that always maddens me about torture. You know how the thing that's most likely to get you the best information when somebody has information for you?
Being nice.
You promise them things that they desperately need.
Well,
your family needs to get out of the country. I'll do that for you, but you got to give me good info, and I will only give it to you once I verify this info is good. If not, you're going to a jail cell, my friend. And you don't even need to torture him. It's jail cell. That's all. You do not need to do anything
so
like
Saren
this.
does learn about Scar, and that he has a target that his target is on Elysium. That's all that Grotto knows, and he tortures this out of him.
No, that's...
And eventually, Grotto's just asleep from the sheer mental and physical trauma. And Saren's like, well, I can't call the cops, because that'll tip off everyone that I'm onto them now. So he just kills Grotto by breaking his neck in his sleep. Quote, a quick death, because Saren thinks he is not a monster.
I want to puke so bad right now. I feel sick.
It's a fascinating scene to listen to in the audiobook because David Kawachi makes you feel sorry for Grotto.
As you should. Nobody should ever have to go through that.
It's nauseating to listen to.
You should no being should ever be tortured like that.
No, they shouldn't.
It is just...
I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's what happens in the book.
It is so hard to hear that.
But This is not the cruelest, I think, for Saren in this book. The next time that the crueler thing I think he does is not as grotesque, but I feel it's worse.
But we know he's a monster with a facade of justice.
Yeah.
You know.
Literally, his thing is, it doesn't matter. There's billions of lives at stake.
So he's lawful neutral.
Yeah.
At this point.
At this point. I would say maybe even a little, maybe he straddles between the evil and neutral.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we cut back to Anderson, who goes to visit Grissom on Elysium.
Okay.
And it's kind of funny, like Grissom is in a house that's like far enough away from his neighbors to not be a noise bother. And it's just like this. It's not what you'd expect.
Oh.
For someone of his stature. It's like he just wants to blend in and not be bothered anymore.
Well, as you mentioned,
which I can understand.
You mentioned in the last episode that like he's just used to having the press on him all the time. Yeah. And a lot of those people prefer private spaces. That's kind of the reason why a lot of rich people, they have these huge houses that are in the middle of like these secluded lots. And it's because they're so used to having so much attention on them that they need to be able to go to a space where they have a lot more control.
Yeah.
And as much as I personally think that mansions are a waste of resources, that's another story for another day.
So anyway, Grissom tells Anderson that he sent Kali away from Elysium to safety. And Anderson leaves. A few days later, Scar shows up and attacks Grissom and Kali. Kali was actually hiding in Grissom's house.
Oh, so Anderson just trusted that Grissom was...
Anderson keeps the place under surveillance, and when he sees Scar in there, he returns and fights Scar.
Oh, wow. He's just going to take it to a Krogan. That just reminds me of, what is it? In Mass Effect 2, there's a bartender who, like, he will watch you. It's a Asari bartender. And she'll talk and give Shepard some info. And there's one point where Shepard's about to get in a fight, and the Asari unknown just goes like, kick him in the quads. Sorry, my dad was a Krogan. It's just so ridiculous. But anyway, so we're hoping Anderson kicks him in the quads.
Well, in the middle of the fight, Saren appears and drives Scar off, and the Krogan manages to escape.
Oh, wow.
And Saren questions Kali about Sidon. Literally, they're like sitting in Grissom's kitchen.
Yeah, that's where a lot of those confrontations will go. If cinema has taught me anything, it's like the post-fight decompress is always in the kitchen.
She lies and says they were researching human biotics, knowing that if she revealed the truth about the research being done in Sidon, Saren would alert the Council, and the Alliance would be in big trouble.
Yeah, humanity would essentially like lose a ton of privileges.
So after Saren leaves, Kali tells Anderson that all the equipment for the project was supplied by Datan Manufacturing on Kamala.
Okay.
And they plan to sneak off Elysium and go to the Datan facility, and this actually requires changing Kali's appearance. And the problematic thing people have a problem with is this also includes changing her skin color with pills.
Yeah.
She is blonde hair, fair skin, blue eyes, and by the end of this transformation, her skin is actually about the same color as Anderson's. Which I am fine with pigment pills being a thing. That is a thing that's in sci-fi a lot. The video I saw made a point to reference Rachel Dolezal.
Yeah. So, and guys, part of the reason Mystic's looking at me with trepidation is that after the Rachel Dolezal, and if you don't know Rachel Dolezal, I'm not going to go over her stuff. Just look it up. But after that happened, there were a lot of people going to me being like, well, what does that mean for you, considering you're a black woman, but you are just as light as Rachel Dolezal, which is not true. I think she did a lot of spray tan or whatever. But anyway... and when you have passing privilege, you have to be really careful with it because it still means something today. So I think the problem with having a plot point like this is that, yes, in the future, the skin tone will not matter as much. But to make it a plot point when it comes to a disguise, and we're not going to like disguise her as an Asari, is problematic, unfortunately.
Well, that would be a lot, to be fair.
A lot harder for her in a lot of different ways. Yes, because then you also need a crest. But you can, considering it's not like fair-skinned people are going to disappear in the future.
Right.
So if you
blonde hair does though. So dyeing her hair makes sense.
Dyeing
her hair is very stand out.
Hair, contacts, fake scars or freckles.
They do hair, they do contacts, and then they do pigment pills.
There's yeah.
He is careful to say this is actually one of Grissom's underworld associates, like this 20-year-old kid that does this for them.
Wow.
Anderson keeps questioning like what he's doing, and the guy's like looks to Grissom and says, "Can we trust this guy?"
Yeah.
And Anderson's like, "I was just saying the same thing about you."
Yeah.
And Grissom says, "Today you can. Next time you see him, you may want to go the other way."
Right. Okay. But I don't know. I'll just say this. They should have just left the pigment pills for skin tone on the draft and like edited it out. But I mean,
he is careful to say that it's also temporary. It'll be lightened and almost gone by the next day.
And I think if I remember correctly, one of the reasons you don't want to do this too is because if you read the book Black Like Me, where a journalist went undercover as an African American back in like the 50s. I have the book. I can look it up. But
I remember this actually, yeah.
Yeah, and I read it for a school project, and yeah, he also there are pills to this day that will make you look darker. And I don't think it's necessarily good for you or your liver. So, like, it's kind of just associated with this idea of, like, I don't know. I would have nixed it.
No, I don't think they don't do anything. Here's the thing I think that it makes this less of a problem is when we're talking about something like Black Like Me, where it's like, oh, you just change your skin tone and now you know what it's like to be black or whatever, and they don't do anything with it. It's literally we are changing her skin tone. Here's her new ID, and then the next scene is her ID working. Like there's nothing else about it. It's literally just like this one line thing.
Yeah. There's so many, I'm not going to get into, we can have a mini episode about the problems when it comes to pigmentation in sci-fi.
I realized I skipped something early on when we first started. When this whole book starts and we go 8 years further,
yeah,
Cynthia and Anderson have just finalized their divorce.
Right.
I don't think I mentioned that.
I'm glad you did mention that because in the back of my head, I knew that had to have happened.
Yeah. So they're divorced, and Anderson has just met Kali.
Yeah.
But he has this weird reaction when this guy is massaging this dye into Kali's hair or touches her hand to give her the ID and stuff and all this stuff. He like has this like his fists clenched slightly or whatever, and then he has to remind himself that Kali is not Cynthia, and it's like you've just met her. Like
yeah, that's...
To be fair, he just finalized his divorce like 2 days before
but
and got stupidly drunk at Cora's Den.
But that does not make you protective of other random women, especially when you serve on a multi-gendered fleet.
I think he realizes that that's a problem. Like, I think he realizes he's like, you're doing this and this is dumb.
But I don't think that's something that would happen for a guy like that. I think it feels a little forced. Right. Considering what is alluded to when you play the games, I know what's eventually going to happen, but there's a better way. There's a better way to do it. Dare I say, Gator did it better.
David Gator, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, this disguise works. They get in with this smuggler, and Kali asks, this is just a line I loved. Kali asks, like, how do you know my father? And he just goes, if he wanted you to have the information, he would have told you.
That's fair. I mean, I think that completely makes sense.
Meanwhile, Scar returns to Adon after, being spooked off by Saren, who sends him and the Blue Sun mercenaries to destroy the Daton facility because this is kind of the only thing that can tie him to any of this now.
Right.
And Jella is a Batarian woman working at the facility.
Do we ever even see Batarian women in the game, out of curiosity?
I do not know.
Now, we didn't get sidetracked while we're figuring this out. We didn't see Batarian... We may not have seen Batarian women, but we didn't see Turian women until Andromeda. No, until DLC for the second game? It took a while.
We didn't see what?
Turian women.
DLC for the third game.
Third game.
Yeah, that was Noreen?
Yeah.
From Omega. And then we had Vetra Nyx in Andromeda.
Yes. And then Quarians always had both genders available. Asari are monogendered. Solarians, you've seen both genders throughout the games because I think there are some like older Solarian matriarchs you see at some point.
I can't find one.
Yeah. Feel free to at me at our Twitter or something to let me know if there's a scene I'm misremembering.
Jella is a Batarian woman working at the facility, and she gets paid to leave a certain door unlocked. And she's leery. It's a weird request, but the pay is good, and she's also regularly changing numbers on shipments and leaving inventory unsecure. She's not paid well, and there's a lot of grifting and other stuff going on. So she's like, okay.
Right.
This allows Scar and the Blue Suns to gain access to the facility and just start laying waste to it with the specific job also to kill Jella. But she manages to survive because Scar mistakes another Batarian female for her and assumes that he's done. And then they blow up the facility.
That's racist.
Well, he did not get that picture. So she's running from the wrecked facility when there's an explosion. Her legs are amputated and burns are covering her body.
Whoa. People go through a lot in this story. This is intense.
And Saren comes to the hospital looking for information.
Oh no.
Because she's the only survivor.
This is...
This is where I feel Saren is actually his cruelest.
Oh, no.
She is in a medically induced coma.
Yeah.
And Saren sends a medical staff away and wakes Jella to question her. And her injuries are life-threatening, but she manages to give him Edan Hadda's name. She had heard this from some of the mercs. And then Saren deliberately withholds an injection that could put her back into her coma and save her life. He waits until she dies and then injects the fluid to cover his tracks.
What is even the point of that? What is even the point of... First of all, if you're a medical professional, you'll be able to tell right away that was injected post-mortem. Like, there's no reason for that.
That's why I think that one's crueler. Because Jella had almost no chance of surviving anyway.
Right.
Grotto was an evil scumbag.
Yeah.
Who didn't deserve what he got. But he was already not going to survive with the amount of trauma he was under by that point. You know, ruptured eye, all his limbs broken. He's going to be in shock forever. He's not at a medical facility.
Yeah.
You know, Jella is, I think, more tragic in that regard because...
There was no reason to do any of this. There was no reason to do it.
He justifies it as making sure that he's not found out that he's on the trail.
You know how you could have done that? There's probably a Citadel version of the Witness Protection Program. I mean, holy guacamole. There was no reason to do any of that. That's just... oh, my Lord.
Meanwhile...
It's been a while since I've been this angry on this show.
Meanwhile, news of the AI research at the Sidon facility has finally reached the council.
Oh.
And they rebuke Ambassador Goyle. And she gets angry, pointing out that the prominent roles humans have in the galactic arena after such a short time.
Yeah.
And negotiates a deal for the Alliance to get off lightly with just trade sanctions.
That's really good ambassadorship right there. That is knowing how to wield what little power you have. That's pretty good.
Finally able to trust Anderson, Kali makes a confession to him. She knows who the traitor was at Sidon. Dr. Kian himself.
Uh-oh.
Anderson is skeptical, but Kali explains that Dr. Kian was studying something new, an alien artifact that might even predate the Protheans. After he started studying it in earnest, Dr. Kian's interest turned into a dangerous obsession. She thinks Dr. Kian is working with Edan Hadda. Ambassador Goyle tells this all to the council as a show of good faith, and they decide to send Saren after Edan Hadda.
So now they're supposed to be working together.
Goyle asks for Anderson to be involved as a possible Spectre candidate. This is where we start getting into the stuff we kind of know about.
That's been alluded to in our last live stream. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Kali is to be smuggled off of Kamala by Alliance Marines, but Saren, knowing Hadda is hunting Kali, sees this as a perfect opportunity to lure out the Batarian.
Interesting.
And leaks word to Hadda's contacts.
There's no way this is a safe and fair option to anybody involved other than Saren, and it's not cool.
So the SSV Iwo Jima starts descending into the atmosphere with its shields down to pick up these 2 rovers of Marines who are bringing Kali in. Mm-hmm. And the Blue Suns ambush the Marines, and actually Scar, with this ridiculous gun, actually manages to destroy the SSV Iwo Jima. Because its shields were down, he hits it with a bunch of explosive rounds from a mass accelerator cannon, and it just...
Whoa.
And they capture Kali in order to help Dr. Kian's research.
Help?
She's a scientist.
Yeah, I don't know.
And Anderson is furious at Saren.
Of course, I'd be too, because you just risked a bunch of lives.
He probably got a lot of people killed.
Yeah.
Again. That's
true. I'm sorry. I'm focusing so much on the torture, but also the blatant dragging people into a battle they didn't know was coming is also pure murder.
The SSV Iwo Jima just goes down.
It's murder. Yeah. That's total murder.
But Anderson needs Saren's help to rescue Kali, who has been taken to an Element Zero refinery. We touched on Element Zero last time.
Yes.
Unknown to Anderson, Saren is now more interested in obtaining Dr. Kian's research for himself than saving Kali.
Interesting.
Saren reluctantly agrees to give Anderson some time to find Kali before they blow the building, and Anderson sneaks in and kills Scar with Kali's help, and they get out just as Saren destroys the refinery. Saren finds Haddah and Dr. Kian in hiding. He kills the doctor on Haddah's suggestion that Kian's irrationality has made him a liability. Then, despite Haddah's bargaining that without him, it will take Saren years to utilize their research, he also kills the Batarian, stating that he is patient and just takes the research.
Do we get explanation at the end what all this research is? Or
yeah.
Okay. All right, because I have an idea.
Returning to the Citadel, Anderson discovers Saren gave a damning report of the conduct during the mission. True or not, it means the Citadel Council is not willing to induct a human Spectre at this time.
Because Saren is racist.
Without evidence, the Council is not prepared to go chasing after Dr. Kian's artifact either. Despite the attraction between them, Anderson and Kali have to part ways. There is some actual attraction between them. It's not just Anderson being whatever.
Yeah.
Anderson has his military career to follow, and Kali has been promoted and reassigned to a new classified posting, which we'll touch on when we get to Mass Effect Ascension in some future episode.
Okay. And I think that relates to we find her in Mass Effect 3.
It's related, but it's not. We'll get there.
Yeah.
It's probably my favorite of the 3 books that I've listened to. Meanwhile, Saren has been studying the research he stole and is fascinated by the description of it, an enormous starship of devastating power. He believes his whole life, even his career as a Spectre, has been a prelude to this discovery. And Saren plans to use this data to find the warship and use it to exact his revenge upon humanity.
And if you were wondering what that pre-Prothean technology is, it's Reaper Tech. Which will indoctrinate you with the wub-dubs.
Yeah, which is what actually happened to Adan Haddah
yes.
and Dr. Shu Qian, is that they were both slowly indoctrinated, and Saren is also slowly indoctrinated too.
Exactly.
So that's Mass Effect Revelation in a nutshell.
But that explains the history between Saren and Anderson that prevented the humanity having a Spectre. So
now there is one other little prequel for Anderson jammed in between this and Mass Effect 1.
Yeah.
And it's basically when they're testing the SSV Normandy.
Oh, okay.
Joker basically hijacks the Normandy and takes it on the testing run against and starts dodging weapons fire and stuff because they're trying to stop him.
Oh my lord.
And then they're like, why did you do this? And he's like, I was born to pilot this ship.
I'm proving to you that this is my ship, jerks.
Pretty much. And that's the most of the extent of the comic, really. It's kind of just a fun little thing with Joker and
fun.
Anderson, because Anderson's there watching the tests and everything.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we end this episode.
One thing I do want to ask, and I'm not sure if this gets answered in the book, but something that people sometimes don't always notice is that almost all Turians will have some sort of like war paint on them. That's part of their. That's part of distinguishing who they are from everybody else. It's just something they all do. Saren does not have any. Now, is there any explanation as to why Saren does not have his face paint like every other? And this is male and female Turians. They all have this paint, and it kind of distinguishes, I think, where they're from, if I remember correctly.
I know what you're talking about. They all seem to have some sort of paint or tattoo or whatever it is. I can't remember if it's explained in the book.
Because there is a saying, at one point they say that somewhere you read that it's suggested that a Turian without their face paint is to not be trusted.
So, since the Unification War, which we briefly touched on in the last episode, that Turians had a Unification War.
Yes.
Turians normally wear elaborate tattoos marking their colony of origin, though it is not known which markings distinguish which colony or if its color has any meaning. I'm literally cribbing and reading from the wiki here.
Okay.
These markings are usually white, particularly on Turians with darker carapaces, but can often be of other colors such as blue for Garrus Vicurian or red for Nerine Kandaros, which is the female Turian you mentioned for Mass Effect 3.
Yeah.
The lack of facial markings is looked down upon in Turian society. The Turian term barefaced refers to one who is beguiling or not to be trusted.
Yeah. And it's kind of like Saren is the embodiment of that. He's barefaced. Yeah. So it's almost like...
But he's also the most decorated Spectre. Like, he is the top Spectre.
So he is the stereotypically least trustworthy Turian.
Of the Turian, yeah.
But he is very successful outside of Turian space. Right. Outside of the Turian meritocracy.
Right. Any other questions about the book, though?
No. That was the one I was most curious about, because I wanted to know why he wasn't tied to a colony.
I don't think they ever mentioned it. But again, the book is obviously a lot longer than what we just did.
Yes.
Even if you've played the game, you get an appreciation for the races and stuff outside, because it's written in a way that is different than what you experience with the game.
Right.
Like when Anderson is talking to the Solarian information broker, you kind of get this weird sense that you don't quite have, you don't understand how a human reacts to a Solarian in universe. You only have how players react to that.
Right.
Or you're told how a human reacts. You don't get the inner thought process.
Right, exactly. Mystic, do you know what you have planned for next episode?
Nope. So I'll figure something out.
All right. Well, as Mystic figures it out, I guess we will catch you next time. Feel free to reach out to us and let us know if you got any suggestions. And
yeah, we have a few suggestions. Maybe I'll pick one of those.
Yeah. Look through the suggestions. And
all right, everybody.
Make more
Thanks
suggestions,
for listening.
Everybody. All right. We love you for listening. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.